Welcome to Analysys Mason podcast. My name is Jenny Robertson, and I'm the managing partner for Analysys Mason in Sweden. Today, I will host a podcast about how impact investments in digital infrastructure in developing countries can support digital inclusion. To help us to dive into this topic, we've invited one of our clients, Finnfund, who's an impact investor, and one of their focus areas being connectivity and digital infrastructure. The guests we are with us today from Finnfund is Niklas Simola and Kuutti Kilpeläinen, both working with digital infrastructure. A very warm welcome to our podcast. I'll start by handing over to Kuutti to introduce Finnfund and your team.
Thank you, Jenny, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Kuutti Kilpeläinen. I'm heading the Digital Infrastructure and Solutions investment team here at Finnfund. Effectively, I'm responsible for our telecoms and tech sector portfolio globally, as well as the investment strategy for the sector. So Finnfund, we are a government-owned development finance institution, an impact investment fund. We're managing capital from the government of Finland, and then in addition to that, some institutional money as well. We do growth stage investments in emerging markets globally, meaning Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. We're a sector agnostic fund, approximately 1.3 billion in size, and digital sector is really one of the core focus areas that we have. And I'll let Niklas, my colleague, to introduce himself as well and tell a bit more what we specifically do in the sector.
Yeah, and thanks on my behalf also, Jenny, for inviting us. My name is Niklas. I've been at Finnfund for 6 years now, mainly been focusing on TMT without DM. Main responsibilities include the origination, execution, portfolio management, also working on the investment strategy with Kuutti. Before Finnfund, I did 6 months secondment at African Invest, one of the larger PE firms focused on Africa, whereas focusing their financial inclusion vehicle fund, mainly focusing on the fintech and insurtech investments. And also prior to that, experience include transaction advisory and treasury. And then when it comes to our team, so the Digital Infrastructure Solutions team, we are a growth stage investor, investing across the digital value chain. So starting off on the infra side, where we invest across submarine cables, terrestrial fiber, data centers, towers, even last mile fiber, for instance. And then for the digital solutions side is where we invest across what that data and infrastructure enables. So we need the techno business of the world. So this would include likes of fintechs, e-commerce, insurtech, health, and edtech. As we are a commercial impact investor, we did set up this team across 3 themes, which is the coverage gap, usage gap, and promoting meaningful access. So hence, digital inclusion, financial inclusion, access to health, information, and education.
Great. Thank you for joining, and thanks for the introductions. I think we would sort of start with the basics. When people talk about digital divide, what do they actually mean? And why do you think this is important to address this challenge in these countries and markets?
Yeah, so perhaps I can start here. To put it very simply, the digital divide means the gap between those who have access to internet and technology and digital literacy and those who do not have that access. So people are excluded from the basic internet connectivity either because of coverage or usage. And this is how we look at digital divide here at Finnfund and in our daily work. Why does this then matter? So World Bank has estimated that 10% increase in digital connections leads to a 2.5% increase in GDP. And obviously, nothing works or grows in isolation without connections in the modern world. So developing country really falls further into the outer reaches of development if it's not properly connected to the surrounding world. And if these connections on a more macro level are weak, it obviously puts the entire society, its citizens, its businesses in an unequal position in this modern world. So that's what we mean by the digital divide and why it matters.
Thank you. If we start with the internet connectivity, can you describe a little bit what it looks like right now in low-income countries or really remote parts of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually keep close eye on this, and there's good estimates provided by GSMA. So that's our main partner when looking into the problem. So I mentioned the digital divide is either because of coverage, so people who are living in areas with no meaningful connections at all, or then because of usage, so people are within the reach of the connections but not using this broadband. And if we then further drill down what this means in terms of numbers, so the coverage gap as of today is more than 300 million people still globally living in areas with no meaningful connection at all. Majority of this is in sub-Saharan Africa, so 160 million people only in sub-Saharan Africa that are left without proper broadband. But the bigger issue in terms of digital divide is actually the usage gap. So there are over 3 billion people globally who could technically use broadband connection, but are not using it because of affordability, relevancy, or digital literacy. Affordability being the main barrier. And this is something that we are addressing through our investments. And more specifically, if we look different geographies in emerging markets, so in sub-Saharan Africa, we're talking over 700 million people. In South Asia, over 900 million people. And even in Latin America, over 200 million people who are suffering from this. So usage gap is really something that is causing a lot of digital inequality. And by lowering the cost of connections, cost of devices, and by providing content that is meaningful, we get more people online and therefore then promote the overall economy.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned coverage and you mentioned affordability. Are there any other factors such as geography, education, government policies, etc., that would affect the current state of connectivity?
Yeah, obviously, all of these do have an impact, but the main issue or the biggest issue is the affordability. Also, or let's put it this way: the first and foremost important issue is that to have the proper infrastructure in place, and obviously through policy you can enable the development of the infrastructure. But then once you have it in place, you need to ensure that it's actually competitive, it's reliable, it's high speed, and most importantly, affordable. And obviously competition helps here, and the overall penetration of the infrastructure. So it kind of starts from the policy level, but then you need to develop it further from there in order to enable then all these other drivers.
Yeah. So I mean, affordability, knowledge, education, etc. Does the relevance of the content play into this as well, or is that secondary in this when talking about why people that could get online are not doing it? Does that have anything to do? Do people know what to use it for? Or could they see the purpose of getting online, having services that are relevant to them?
Do you want to, Niklas, tackle this one?
Sure. Yes. I mean, the relevance comes into play as well. As you do see in these regions where people, especially on usage gap, to have digital literacy. One thing is that they don't probably have the knowledge or understanding of what that connection can unlock. And what we see across our portfolio companies that have, let's say, tackling the usage gap is when people get educated on what content is available, you start to see a spike on that connectivity and also improving their livelihoods as well, especially on terms of education, access to information. I think are key items that benefit from this once the users are aware of what is available on the internet.
Yeah. Have you seen any examples where there is a service that have actually been the main driver for people getting connected because it's something they need in their day-to-day life, so that the service itself is a driver for getting people to connect?
Sure. I guess if you take a step back, I think one use case from our portfolio companies, more on the providing a affordable, meaningful connection, has unlocked that, let's say, access to services and a quite large feat. So one of our portfolio companies, FiberTime, in short, FiberTime operates in South Africa, providing a high-speed, unlimited fiber on a time-based pay-as-you-go model. Hence, users acquire a daily, weekly, or monthly bundle to access the internet, where there's no cap on speed on the connection. And one of the amazing stories there is this lady who lives in a township. She works in a call center, and before fiber time was available in the township, she would travel more or less 4 hours per day and spending roughly 900 Rand per month, which is about over 40 euros in euro terms. And when fiber time came into the township and it was accessible for her especially, she is now able to work from home, meaning that she can save up that 900 Rand per month that she'd be using for all the travels. And while she only spends roughly 110 Rand for that fiber connection, hence having saved 790 Rands for other uses, which in this case is she has been using it for online education to improve her education background. And also in terms of social impact, is also that she now sees her children going to school, spends time with them in the afternoon, making sure that they also stay out of trouble. So on top of the economic benefits, there's also a large social impact as well.
That's a very encouraging story, which actually leads a little bit into my next question. And I think you already touched upon it with the education job, about the human impact and what kind of difference the connectivity or the lack of connectivity make in areas like education, healthcare, jobs, or even participation in civic life.
Yeah, I can tackle this question. So overall, when we look at these different digital solutions tackling the areas you mentioned, education, healthcare, so on, the digital channels, digital tools can address more efficiently these specific areas than the traditional brick and mortar approach that we are probably used to in the Western world. So the digital services can actually solve many fundamental access issues in emerging and frontier markets. But the bigger issue is that individuals and businesses are lacking access to these services at the moment. So there's a solution available, but the mass market, or especially the lower income part of the market, is lacking access there. These challenges are particularly pronounced in rural and underserved areas, where the absence of affordable infrastructure then hampers the economic and social development. So the fact is that without proper infrastructure in place, you can't utilize these digital solutions that then increase the productivity and provide access to digital tools, products, and services, and so on. And obviously, by having access to these digital tools, digital goods, products, and services, you then promote other things like gender equality and financial inclusion. So we first need to fix the infrastructure in order to enable the more efficient business models built in the digital channels. So in our view, the digital tools and technologies are the key drivers of economic growth. They boost productivity, they foster innovation, and they open new markets. The digitalization itself enhances access to information and resources, which then empowers entrepreneurs and small businesses, especially in these developing countries, low-income communities. So e-commerce platforms, mobile payments, digital supply chains, they have really revolutionized the business landscape and foremost allowed greater participation in the global economy. Now we just need to ensure and make sure that these digital tools are available in the most hard to reach and difficult jurisdictions, locations as well, because we do recognize the benefits of it. And as said in the beginning, the traditional brick and mortar type of approach with physical infrastructure is not feasible, but through digital channels, you can reach much wider audience and bring services in a more efficient manner.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and maybe if possible to provide a bit more context on, especially in terms of financial services, which like in terms of fintechs, of course, that's the biggest of digital services in our emerging markets, is that many of these markets, you have a high unbanked and underbanked population. So meaning unbanked, so they have no kind of bank accounts, no kind of access to any kind of financial services. And underbanked is more that they have a bank account, but they're quite limited of what kind of lending or any kind of financial service products they are able to access. And with traditional banks, was very difficult, having a high customer acquisition costs, and also they have no kind of credit data to provide any kind of lending for these parties. Whereas then having the fintechs coming up in the world has provided such a different pathway for financial inclusion, when you can underscore the credit rating with alternative data, as well as being able to streamline a bit your customer acquisition cost much more efficiently, and just having no branches, a branchless model per se, and going through the digital channels has also created a much unified, let's say, population in these markets where traditionally these people have struggled, even getting to another, let's say, to the higher income bucket per se.
Yeah. It's interesting with the fintech and mobile money space, and I think this is often described as an enabler for digital inclusion in many countries. Do you agree with that, or are there other applications that you want to highlight or that you think are equally important?
I think mobile money sets a good foundation for digital inclusion, and the problem really starts from the fact that people do not have access, meaning they don't have bank accounts.
Yeah.
There are no payment methods other than cash. So once you are able to digitize and remove the cash element, obviously payments become more efficient. You get that digital footprint, which is the starting block for digital inclusion and financial inclusion. But mobile money itself don't solve for everything. As I said, it's a good ground for starting that financial and digital inclusion path. But then you need to be able to offer credit solutions, saving solutions, and that's where we see now a lot of fintechs emerging. Sort of, it often starts with payments, but the reality is that payments is something that it's very hard to monetize in the end. So it's also a business logic that you need to offer value add other services. So I think the most successful fintechs are the ones who are able to offer multiple different products for these underserved people or underserved businesses. And therefore, the impact on financial inclusion is also the greatest.
Yeah. Are there any particular communities or countries that stand out to you? Are there anywhere there are specific challenges that are unique or telling in some way that you've seen so far?
Yeah, I think overall, when we look emerging markets as a big group of countries or regions like Global South, Africa, Southeast Asia, South Asia, Latin America, the fundamental problems tend to be the same when it comes to connectivity and digital inclusion. Obviously, there are then local flavors to it, but the underlying problems are the same, and it's around the coverage, first of all, and then the affordability, reliability of the connections. But you asked whether there are particular communities or countries that stand out. I think Nepal is a very interesting example of a country where there is actually surprisingly high penetration in terms of digital usage, broadband penetration. I think overall, if we look at the country, it's over 100%. So people do have a very good access to internet. Obviously, majority of people access the internet with their phone, but fiber penetration is also one of the highest in South Asia. The country is a low-income country, but somehow they've been able to roll out this very well-functioning infrastructure and of their fiber-based. And I think the unique geography of the country has, first of all, created many issues when it comes to reaching the rural areas and low-income communities.
Yeah, for sure.
And their fiber is often the only viable way to offer high-quality connections, given that mobile towers can provide meaningful coverage because of the mountains. So I think that is an interesting example of a country where the geography has played a role on how products and services are offered, but then at the same time, the cost of data is relatively low. So then you have a large share of the population in low-income country utilizing digital tools. And now their payments, everything's been digitized. So it's surprising when you go there and realize that they've taken the digital leap, which is quite counterintuitive when you're looking purely from outside.
Yeah, for sure. It's a very impressive example. So there you can say that actually the geography or the challenges with the geography has been one of the drivers for actually deploying fiber rather than having the mobile connections. Yeah,
exactly.
If you connect this to LEO satellites and Starlink, do you see that would have an impact on the connectivity in developing countries going forward?
Yes, for sure. And obviously there's been a huge developments in the satellite industry in the past couple of years. A lot of that needs to be credited to Starlink, SpaceX. They've managed to lower the cost of launching satellites, which then obviously helps to make the business case here. So in our opinion, the LEO satellites will have a place in the ecosystem, especially for providing that backhaul connection to these remote rural areas where fiber deployment does not make commercial sense. Fiber is still needed for moving the traffic and backhauling. So satellites won't come and completely replace what we have here today, but it provides a viable alternative way of connecting. And that connection is especially relevant in areas where there is no existing infrastructure in place. And there are other providers to Starlink on the LEO satellite side. So we are keeping close eye on Kuiper, OneWeb. And again, competition helps here. So I'm sure that the applications and the price points will also reach wider audience in coming years. I think the main challenge is the regulatory standpoint, where number of hurdles need to be overcome. And the bandwidth capacity is another issue, but these are things that can be solved and will be solved over time. So the short answer to your question is that yes, satellites will play an important role, but they are not going to disrupt completely what we have today.
And of course, we have to talk a little bit about AI. And is that something you will see have an impact on digital inclusions? Is it something that could help, or could it create new challenges? Or do you have a view of AI and how that could impact us going forward?
Yeah, in terms of emerging market context, I think the AI focus will be on addressing the fundamental challenges, as well as improving access to essential services. So we do start seeing, in terms of like financial services, you start seeing AI. You start seeing AI in the credit scoring models, whereas in the, for example, education, it's more personalized and personalized, tailored education content. On health, it's directly towards telemedicine, and as well as when you look at more the digital infra side, AI can help on optimizing the network capacity, analyzing where you can potentially deploy new fiber or new towers. So you do see AI having its place. I guess thing is that for emerging markets, it's a bit a different context compared to what you see in developed markets. But for sure, there is a place for AI to improve.
So let's talk a bit about Finnfund. You work with all kind of partners, from government to private companies. How do these public-private partnerships help push innovation and get more people connected?
Sure. So yeah, we do work amongst like all the stakeholders possible in these regions. Starting off with more of the government side, work have a good partnership with the European Commission, where we have signed a guarantee scheme called Africa Connected that helps us mobilize a bit more capital into sub-Saharan Africa region while taking a bit more risk per se on the investments. As well as this also unlocks technical assistance, which is quite vital for these businesses to help them grow in terms of improving their own operations, trainings, improving their own internal policies, even also product market fit exercise as well. In terms of private companies, we do work with all of the local private funds, either it's on the VC or private equity side, and to promote and mobilize more private capital in these regions. So in short, it is vital in these regions to have all the stakeholders involved
have a unified push for this digital infrastructure investments, as well as promoting the digital services that we've also talked about a lot.
Yeah. You mentioned Fiber Time earlier as a good example of of the human impact and the impact on the individual. Can you share any other examples of investments you've done lately where you felt that it really made a difference for people on the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will use actually a completely different type of an example here in terms of scale of the business. So we invested early this year a company called Cassava Technologies, which is one of the largest ICT companies in African continent. They have over 100,000 kilometers of fiber. They have data centers across the continent. And in addition to all of this, they also offer services, cloud services to SMEs. They have payments business, so really tackling the whole digital value chain. Very similar how we as a Finnfund view the digital value chain. Cassava shares the same vision and has exposure to all of these different layers. There we invested equity together with the US DFC and Google, really to boost the growth of the company across these different verticals. And we view that these larger infra companies are enablers of fiber times, for example. So in order to be successful and really impact and provide that impact in the target regions, we need to be present across the value chain from the backbone connectivity, which is the main business of Cassava Technologies, all the way to the last mile connectivity. And this can only be achieved if we are mindful of the bottlenecks and find the right type of companies that then address these bottlenecks. So Cassava, what we really like there is obviously the Pan-African approach they have, the north to south, east to west type of connection, and then what it enables for all the smaller players in the market.
Thank you. That's an interesting perspective. If you look at digital inclusion, are there any ways you feel that you, with some security, could measure the success? I know that there's a lot of more traditional metrics in terms of homes passed, number of new connections, et cetera, et cetera. Is there anything else that you could look at to see that this was a good investment from a digital inclusion perspective?
Yeah, the reality is that when we look to impact from the digital infrastructure or digital services solutions, often the impact metrics are actually quite operational metrics for these businesses. So I mentioned earlier the digital divide defined as the coverage gap or the usage gap. So the more households we have connected, obviously, the wider the services available. But then we also measure sort of the pricing side. So what has happened to the cost of data, be it the consumer packages or the backhauling cost of data. But in the end, the impact and the operational metrics are quite aligned, which also means that for a commercially focused and return-focused impact investor, this is a good sector to be in because these two things go hand in hand.
And maybe to add to that, we do also work with partners like 60 Decibels and Work Ahead to do these impact studies where we also get quite a lot of insightful data of also how, for example, any kind of digital service or then the connection has improved their livelihood in terms of social impact, but also economical impact, which has been a really truly insightful of understanding of what are the real impacts for the end users of these services.
Yeah. And I think looking at the countries that are sort of struggling the most with digital divide, it seems like they also tend to be the toughest places to invest in because of political risks and other challenges. Do you have a view on how do you approach working with these kind of environments, and how do you make sure that you actually reach these people that are based in countries that are difficult to do business with?
Yeah, I guess the reality is that you can't invest everywhere, so there are some restrictions.
Yeah.
But again, the public-private partnerships on the investment side are actually quite important here as well. So a concrete example on how we are able to go even to more challenging places is the guarantee program that we have together with the European Commission. It's a program called Africa Connected, and it's targeted digitalization projects in sub-Saharan Africa. And effectively, all the countries are in scope, but with a high priority for the lower income, more fragile states. And here, why we are able to then go and invest in these countries is mainly because of this guarantee program that partly offsets the risk for us. So it's not the funding, it's a guarantee program.
Yeah.
But then the overall investment level risk is reduced. And that's why we can get more comfortable. Then also we look quite a lot of players that have more Pan-African footprints where the diversification effect is actually important. So the wider the operations you have, the more countries you're able to serve. Obviously, the macro challenges in one place can be offset by the successes in another. So diversification is also very important when considering the investments.
Yeah, agreed. Are there any other technical solutions or innovative business models that you see could be potential game changers in closing the digital divide? Anything aside from what we have covered so far?
Yeah, I guess when tackling the coverage gap that we discussed earlier, as these are areas, harder to reach areas, but mostly rural areas where you have no kind of, let's say, proper roads. Electricity grid is also most likely not connected in that region. Hence, it's really hard to deploy, let's say, the typical macro towers per se, as well as other challenges there, where the cost of low ARPU, which makes it also, in terms of commercial viable sense, a bit difficult for the mobile operators to deploy there. So there we see one business model that starting to work quite well is in terms of a network as a service. So these providers are deploying light mobile towers of more or less 10 meters tall, which means they're easier to deploy to these harder to reach areas. It's solar powered, so hence you don't need to be connected to the grid. And these have then backhaul use on LEO satellite most of the times, as usually also microwave backhaul can be difficult depending a bit on the terrain where these sites are located. So network service is one model that we do like quite a lot and do see working quite well in these areas. Another one is then on the usage gap is the pay-go models such as fiber time. So traditional models don't work in areas where you have more low income population, as also their own income is not, let's say, always predictable. As they want to always be able to have the possibility to purchase services in more like a sachet type way. And I think these two models are ones that are, let's say, more unique business models on helping address these issues.
Yeah, makes sense. Very interesting. I was thinking about, I think we've had a lot of good information. Just to wrap up the discussion and looking into the future, what's up next for Finnfund? Are there any new areas or projects coming up for you that you're excited about right now and that you could potentially share with us?
Yeah, well, obviously we are very excited that telecoms and tech are the cornerstone of our company-wide strategy. And we have a very strong commitment to deploy capital to digital sector. And as a part of that, we have actually raised a private equity fund where we have institutional investors in addition to government capital. So we are going to deploy more, especially more equity investments in this sector across the global emerging markets. And we are able to mobilize more private sector capital and most importantly, offer a product now to institutional investors that have pushed to go also to emerging markets with a real impact focus. So the fund is called Digital Access Impact Fund. And we've been able to do the first closing now and really excited about the opportunity and looking forward to deploying the capital.
So one last question. Do you see any dream projects, any ideal projects or themes that you would like to work with in the future?
Sure. I mean, I guess it's probably phrase the question a bit on terms of what trends and what, let's say, we see most activity, I'd say more promise in terms of our investment mandate. Of course, data centers are still booming. Of course, you have to be a bit more, let's say, filter out a bit of the AI hype that has been happening in the past year or so, but still there is a lot of potential as many emerging markets are starting to build up that capabilities in terms of infrastructure and also support from government to start building local language models that will need more data center capacity, more investments into the countries. And then another vertical, especially on the digital infra side, is also in the last mile fiber space that we are quite keen on, especially trying to solve the fiber penetration for more lower income population. So case point here is one example is Fiber Time and Netway in our portfolios. And we do see a lot of potential there across all our markets. And then when you go to the solution side, fintech is still a key vertical there that we see a lot of investment going into, lots of interesting business models. And let's say one theme, what you have been seeing for some time, but starting to get more attention is, of course, the use of stablecoin, for example, in remittances. And maybe final point is then on the insurtech side, where for me personally, something where I would like to see a bit more commercial viable models. As is it a large market in our markets, given that you have low insurance penetration, roughly 2% across all our markets. So there's a lot of potential, but there is a bottlenecks, with one being the financial literacy side. But yeah, that's one vertical that keeping an eye on and trying to find the lottery ticket.
Very good. Thank you so much for joining our podcast. And this has been a very insightful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. For the listeners, there's more content on this topic on Analysys Mason website, and you could automatically receive future episodes by subscribing to your Analysys Mason podcast. Thank you all for listening.